Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of the Movie Dojo podcast. This is Andrew, as always, and I will be interviewing Justin Raleigh today. He, along with the team at Fractured Effects, worked on Aquaman, as well as the second season of Westworld, The Conjuring 1 and 2, the second 300 movie, The Nick, Logan Lucky, Supergirl, True Blood, Jarhead, Watchmen, Teenage Caveman, Stranger Things, just to name a few. Welcome to the dojo, Justin.
Thanks, man. You had to throw in Teenage Caveman, huh?
Yeah, I saw that on your IMDb, but what exactly was
an
that?
Abomination. I was working for Stan Winston at the time, and Stan was the producer on all these creature feature projects. And it was kind of, there's an old 50s Teenage Caveman and Day of the Earth Stood Still, and they were recreations of that for, I think they were supposed to be theatrical, but they ended up only going to like Showtime or something like that. And that one is almost unwatchable. Okay. So
the name caught my eye, so I wanted to add a wild card in the introduction.
Oh yeah, it's a wild card for sure. So
okay, well, thanks for being our first guest. This is awesome.
No problem.
We have kind of restructured the SuperHousePodcast. This is part of the SuperHousePodcast network, and Movie Dojo is one of the first things that we're doing under that. And this is an interview-only podcast, along with our YouTube outlet, as you can see here. So, all right. So let's get started off immediately with Aquaman stuff that's making all kinds of news lately and things like that.
Yeah, crazy news.
Yeah, it's kind of unbelievable, honestly. Aquaman, of all heroes. So, as again, part of your introduction, what parts of the movie did you do?
So we did a huge amount of specialty costume work and creature makeup effects work. I think in total we built over 65 suits and prosthetic elements for the show.
Like in particular, like the soldiers in the Fish Kingdom, right?
Yeah, so we did all the soldiers, Fish Kingdom. So we did Dolph's helmet and a lot of his armor, the Zebellian soldiers. We also did the Red Commandos, White Soldiers, some of Atlanta's elements, all the Fish Kingdom. We did the Gold Suit. I know I'm missing other stuff. Orm's Royal Guards. Mm-hmm. Quite a few characters. It's a huge show.
The Royal Guards got probably the least amount of play. They had that one scene where they're holding him back in that thing, I think.
So that build was really just for that one scene.
Okay.
And the costume that we did for Dolph, that was for one scene. I mean, his helmet is in every sequence that he's in, but that one specific outfit. Like if you look at Orm, costume department built 5 or 6 different looks or more for him. So it's a ton of work just to build a little blip on screen.
Right. So. That's cool.
Yeah.
Was there one makeup out of the stuff for Aquaman that was your favorite? Can you even play favorites, or is it too soon? Honestly, I'm not even really a makeup. I'm impressed with the Red Commandos. Okay.
Like just the design evolved and became this incredibly complex design, and we had like 6 weeks to build all those suits, which is insane. Mm-hmm. And just how it turned out and what they were able to do with it on camera was impressive. So I think with that, it's a technological feat, and I'm just happy with the final result. I mean, some of those fight sequences with those suits are incredible.
Yeah. We were like I didn't know much, and we were like several weeks in, and then somebody said, "Oh, it's a reverse wetsuit or whatever, reverse scuba suit."
It's a reverse dive bell suit. So, so instead of being filled with air, it's filled with water.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool.
Which the visual effects that they added to it looked really cool. They amped up our glow and kind of filled in some of the water elements and bubbles and little sea creatures. No.
The legs always reminded me of Mega Man, the video game character. It had those kind of like...
It kind of has that style. Yeah. It's got a bit of that sort of, Japanese anime sort of style.
A little bit.
To it. Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit, yeah, I think so. When you have meetings on for these kind of characters, when you're first brought on, how much are you told about them? Like, are you given like a full character profile for the Trench, the Red Commando? Do you have a meeting with Jeff Johns at DC? Like, how does this go?
It depends. I mean, usually initial meetings are conversations with the director and producer. If there's a script at that time, we'll get the script. If art department has been developing the look for anything, we'll get those elements. But usually the first meeting is always just producer, director. And if there's a script, we go through that and we start our own breakdown that we provide to them. And then from there, sometimes there are meetings where we have DC in the room. And we all sit down and talk about how do we get the essence of the character while still getting what the director's vision is. So.
And they do tell you kind of like motivation, where this character's from, like how much background you get.
Yeah, we always get all of that.
Okay.
So usually, like, for example, James would go through and say, I really want this kingdom to look like this. I want them to have these elements. Their actions should be like this. They're moving in this way, et cetera, et cetera. He'll kind of line out the whole visual process of what he wants them to do and what they should look like in their environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from that initial stage up until the very end, was it pretty much how you were envisioning it, or was it a little bit different?
No, I mean, I think it always kind of changes and augments throughout the design process, but I think in the end, that's what we planned to build. At the beginning, this was the concept, just from verbal conversations to art to final design. I think it stayed relatively consistent with minor changes throughout the process.
Okay. And so when you read that first script for the first time, I mean, it was pretty much what you saw on the screen, and the theater was pretty much that with some minor changes?
I think, I think it definitely changed quite a bit through the whole process.
Okay.
I think changes with just what DC and Warner Brothers wanted to do with the story and with the franchise and with the DC universe developed through the whole process.
Right.
So that changed the script through the process.
Okay.
I don't think what you see in the end is affected by that process. I think James's vision and his goal within the script was unwavered by any of that. But I know from the beginning to the end, there were some changes that developed through that process.
We don't have to go through all that stuff.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So you worked with James Wan for a while. You were on Conjuring 1 and 2 and things like that, and
did the Insidious franchise with him as well. Yeah.
And all of that. And I was wondering, when you first got the call, hey, you're doing Aquaman, like how was that? That was pretty exciting.
Yeah, it was, because honestly, I mean, James has been very loyal to me and to the Fractured team, but it's such a big monster of a show. You never know what the studio is going to think. And, they see a history of doing fairly large budget shows, but not giant $200 million projects with James. So sometimes they don't correlate that my history has tons of those projects in it. So I think once they kind of looked at what was on paper on my resume, shows like Tron and Watchmen and other huge mega projects like that, it was kind of a no-brainer. They were like, okay, well, this is James's guy. James wants to work with him. He has the experience, and his team has the experience. So yeah, sure, let's make it work.
Doing Watchmen, obviously, that's a big superhero show. Yeah, and that must have helped as well.
Yeah, and it's another Warner Brothers property too.
Right.
So Warner Brothers has a history there. We did Sucker Punch with them, which is another specialty costume makeup show. So, and that was $100 million or something as well. So they look at the history. There was success in the history, so I don't think it was a red flag for them to come to us.
Right.
So.
James Wan does seem. I've never met him, but it seems like he's pretty loyal to his crew. I mean, you see him bring along Patrick Wilson with almost everything that he does.
That's true. I mean, he's very loyal, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. And he's found a team that he likes and wants to work with that team, and continues to try and find ways to get everyone involved in the process. And that's not like many other directors that are out there. Right. You find a team that you jive with and you can work well with, and you have kind of a language with each other. It simplifies the whole process. So it makes his job much easier. So.
On set, how is it different working with James Wan as opposed to other directors?
I mean, every director is different. James is very hands-on with everything, with camera, with lenses, with, the way things, if he wanted to blood dress something on set, he'll step in and do that type of stuff. So he's very hands-on. But he also knows what he wants. I mean, he thinks like an editor in a lot of ways, and also because he's involved as a writer, he just has a big global view of what the process should be and what he wants to get.
Right.
So he's able to inform his crew, I think, very well. And step back and kind of look at it and say, here's the big picture. You guys are seeing this little tiny thing. This is really what I'm trying to create. This is why I want it this way. And he can explain that to you. And you go, okay, that makes sense. Where a lot of directors can't really do that.
Okay.
They're not really editors. They have great vision. They're talented directors, but sometimes they don't have the kind of global scope that some directors have.
He sort of has the end product in his head pretty well.
Yeah, very much.
Okay.
Or at least a good sense of what he's trying to achieve, for sure. And that may evolve through the process of filming. Like, in Conjuring 2, we kind of started down one path, and that halfway through, at least for us, changed. He decided that he wanted to ground things and change his aesthetic quite a bit, because it made more sense based on what he was filming and the tone that the actors were giving him. And he really looks at it as a storyteller. What is best for the story,
right?
Which is, as a director, that's what you're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. And your first experience with him was Conjuring 1?
Insidious.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I met with him in 2010 for Insidious, and that was our first project.
Okay.
And from Insidious, we kind of rolled into The Conjuring, went back to Insidious 2.
Okay.
And then did Conjuring, and then I think he went off and became, mega director when he started doing Fast and the Furious, which I didn't do anything on that. But then we came back, and I've continued to do Insidious films with him,
right.
to Conjuring 2, and then now Aquaman. So
at that time, it was kind of like, horror director James Wan is doing an action film.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, this guy can do action and horror,
And fantasy. I mean,
yes.
Aquaman is a fantasy. It's an action film, but it's also a fantasy.
It's a lot of King Arthur in there, Arthurian legends, things like that.
Very much so. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think he did a great job of creating a new world,
mm-hmm.
and not even just one world. It's multiple worlds. I mean, we
mm-hmm.
kept talking about that during the build.
Right.
Like Ken Barrett, the costume designer, and I kept talking about going like, this is massive. People that
Yeah.
don't realize how much is in this story,
right,
are kind of missing the point, because we get into budgetary conversations, and the studio's looking at going like, well, why does it cost this much? And it's like, well, this is not something that you can go and just buy all of your costumes and,
yeah.
walk into the street and shoot your film. It's
right.
like every single aspect of that movie had to be built.
Right.
Everything,
Right.
So it's a massive undertaking for James and for the entire crew.
Yeah. It kind of felt like, obviously this is going to continue. Like with all the kingdoms they introduced, they could be like Game of Thrones under the sea.
Yeah.
There's so much they could do
with
these kingdoms fighting each other. And like, especially when the brine and those guys were talking, it kind of reminded me of like, of like, it's a trap. Like it reminded me of Star Wars in a sense.
Oh, I got you.
Admiral Akbar.
Well, it kind of is. It's sort of Star Wars underwater in a way. I mean, you could make that. You could make that analogy. I mean, but it is. It's giant battles underwater with, ships and all kinds of critters everywhere.
Right.
So in a way, you could make that. I could see how you could make that comparison pretty easily.
Right.
So.
At the time of this recording, the news has just been released, I think today, that it just surpassed the Christopher Nolan Batman films, and which is nuts.
Yeah.
Why do you think? How did Aquaman get here? Like, why? It's kind of nuts, because this is the most made fun of character.
It is, but I think that's also part of its charm. And then you put someone like Jason Momoa in there, who's very charismatic, and he's basically a sex symbol. I mean,
yeah.
He's just
a lot of women like this movie. Seems like
he's a good-looking dude. He's giant, and he's just really charismatic, and he looks powerful. I mean,
right.
I think anyone would be stupid to mess with that guy. He's gigantic.
Yeah.
But you take that, and I think they've given the DC universe a little bit of lightheartedness, where the biggest complaint with the DC world was that it was too serious. The Christopher Nolan tone was very real, very dark, and I think that's very fitting for Batman and an origin of Batman. Batman's comics are incredibly dark.
Right.
its whole family's murdered, and the backstory is not happy. Right. So you use some of that, which I think James did. He has a dark side to it, but then he brought in some of the light and some of the fantasy and some of this big, gigantic world, which we haven't really seen.
Right.
Even Zach's stuff, which I think Zach did a good job with what he was trying to create. Again, it's a dark world, and it doesn't have that big, bright fantasy element, which was missing. Wonder Woman kind of had some of those elements when you kind of go to the Amazon world.
Right.
And I think that was a good selling point because it takes people out of this kind of world, this tone that we sort of live in, which right now is not great for, there's there's a lot of dark things in the world.
Right.
And adding that kind of fantasy element, I think, was a big selling point for this.
Right.
Because it really did become, I don't want to say a popcorn movie, that's the wrong term, but it's a joyful experience. Right. Opposed to kind of reminding you of dark-seated undertones that surround us all the time.
Right. I mean, we don't have to get too much into it, but there was kind of some negative backlash to Batman vs. Superman and definitely Suicide Squad and things like that. And people were saying it was a little bit too dark, and, how dark should Aquaman be and things like that. Right. So it's probably a good choice that they went a little bit lighter, and Shazam is going to be the lightest thing they've ever done. So that'll be interesting, and to me, it kind of felt like it's like they let James Wan do whatever he wanted. It's like you want armored sharks, you want a kraken. Here, go. It's like there was very little studio interference. It's what it felt like to me.
I mean, the studio, of course, always has an opinion. They're always going to have their stamp on things. But James he's a good director. He has a great history. He has a lot of success in his background, especially with Warner Brothers. So I think they gave him what he needed. They gave him the room to be creative and to try and rebuild this universe. They had, I'm sure they had some type of, checklist of what they wanted to try and achieve. And as long as he could fit within that, they would allow and it fit the budget. I think they allowed it to happen. And with something like that, I mean, you're building, like I said, a world. So each world really has to have thought. And I think to create that fantasy, you really have to kind of push it, which he did. I mean, I think in every aspect he pushed it.
Yeah.
It's visually, it's beautiful. It's got some really stunning stuff in it.
And going back to the orange and green suit too, it was. Yeah. I think that's a big thing in the comic book community. It's where it's good to change it up a little bit, but if something's been working for years and years and years on the page in these comics, and it's also just that's what comic fans are used to, and it seems like it spreads out from that niche comic book audience, especially when you make a movie. That desire to see what's on the page isn't just the comic book fans, but it's also I don't know. It seems to just work, just kind of more or less stick to that original source material.
I think that's the trick with any comic book movie is how do you take what's in the graphic novel or on the page of the comic and bring it to life, make it new, make it its own, and have your own spin and artistic license of it, but still carry the essence of what was in the comic. I think the gold suit is a really good example of that. I think with Watchmen, that was a huge undertaking with us and costume designer Michael Wilkinson. I know with even on Justice League, I know they considered, who Michael Wilkinson also designed that. I know they considered doing a gold suit for that.
Okay.
And recently I saw concept artist Konstantin Sekiris post some images on Facebook. And it's a gold suit. I mean, it's Zach's kind of spin on it and Michael Wilkinson's spin on it. But it has the same overall vibe of what you expect of that gold and green kind of costume. With Kim Barrett and James coming into this, James really wanted that classic look. How do we make that classic look cool, powerful? It's got to look completely badass on someone like Jason Momoa.
I mean, almost anything would.
Yeah, I mean, luckily he's got the physique. You don't have to do much to make him look big and muscular. But it could have went really campy or really bad very quickly. And I know there was some early tests that weren't completely successful, and the ultimate, the end goal was like, how do we go back to that kind of classic? We want that rubber suit sort of vibe, where it's the Batman suit, where it's skin tight and it just looks like cool armor over someone's body. So that's why we ended up doing this big rubber suit build on him. Although, certain sequences we had to kind of remove elements of the armor for stunts and other crazy action. But just that pristine precision look, that's really the only way to create it and make it look the way it does.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did they tell you to prepare anything as far as as what to read other than the script? Was there any hey, here's Jeff Johns' New 52 run or anything like that?
No, not really. I mean, we all bought that kind of stuff, and, as we were doing research on the character. But no, I mean, really, it was more just visual.
Okay.
Go to the aquarium or, buy a bunch of...
Did they say go to the aquarium?
No, I'm joking. But I mean, that's kind of the idea is just you want to get as many aquatic books as possible and try and find new weird sea life and, just obscure visual references and start creating a visual language. That's usually the most important thing on a project like that. Of course, you have to understand the source material, but when you're creating a world like that, you have to kind of expand your visual vocabulary, and have something that is, that's why references are so important. Is when you sit in a meeting, I could explain it a million different ways, but one image of something or a couple images cobbled together conveys it much better than what you can do verbally. Right.
Yeah, going around the shop at that time, everybody had a picture of this kind of fish or that kind of fish. Yeah. It wasn't just comic book references, right? It was actual fish, actual aquatic life. That kind of, now that I've been, here for 2 years now, it's has it been 2 years?
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
That's been usually the case. There's usually some sort of real life reference there, which I thought was really cool. I just remember the sculptors were like, man, I love my job at these scales.
Oh,
just sculpting scales was, that was a lot.
It's part of the reason why we ended up 3D printing, Jason's gold suit. It's just that precision. I mean, with the time that we had, it's just not possible. It's not possible in that time frame. To get it that precise. Right. That's mathematically precise. And to do something like that in clay, it is possible. It's very time consuming. Yeah. And the process would take so much longer. So. Right. But your point about using visual aids, I mean, everything that we build in this industry, it has to start from something in nature, even if it's a comic book, we'll look at that as kind of the source and get an idea for it, but then we try and find as many possible references down to, I like this rhino texture, to add to something. And you'll see all the sculptors or any of the painters kind of set up their lookbook, if you will, of all their different items. And the human mind and eye, if you kind of just create something out of your head, it's going to look foreign. It's going to look weird. And sometimes there's a place for that. But most of the time you want to try and incorporate something that's real, something that's tangible, something that you've already seen or someone has already seen. Because then when they look at it, in their brain, they recognize that as something that they've seen before. Opposed to something totally foreign. Which usually when it's totally foreign, it doesn't look as good. It can look good, but most of the time, if you have some reference for someone's brain to key into, it'll look more organic and more real. Right,
like a dragon is based on a lizard.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. You just take a concept and give it wings.
Right.
or a dragon, fire breath, or whatever.
Yeah, we use a lot of bats and lizards and amphibians. Like amphibians for paint schemes all the time. Right. Constant creature, like the predator. It's like loaded in an amphibian world.
And I notice a lot of the sculptors and everybody here, it seems like everybody has a pretty good handle on anatomy. That's the serratus, or that's this muscle, or whatever. Like everybody's almost got a doctor level, level of anatomy. At least the names and the look of it.
People like to make fun of me for that, but I don't.
It's not just you.
It's everyone.
I've seen Joe do it. I've seen a lot of people. They know.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. I mean, I think any classically trained artist, and I'm not completely classically trained, and a lot of us are not, but we had some type of art background. And within art, you look at the old fine artists, Rembrandt, Da Vinci, all these guys, they studied anatomy, and how it functions. And that's really the only way you can be a good sculptor. Even if you're sculpting a creature, you need to look at similar animal anatomy or whatever is similar to that character you're creating. so you can understand function, how the muscles would move, how things would compress. I mean, that's
Right.
Anatomy is really, really key to selling a sculpture and selling that it looks real and could actually function.
Proportions and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's proportions, but it's also, dynamics of movement. How something closes its arm and reaches out, and you would understand that there's wrinkles and compression here, so your sculpture would dictate that.
Right.
So.
It's got to read right. Was it so? Aquaman was shot in Australia, and mostly in Australia. And what?
Yeah, I mean, primarily it was shot in Australia.
Yeah.
We had some pickups in Los Angeles, and they did a couple locations, but all principal photography with our main actors were all shot in Australia.
Are there any differences in practical effects world in Australia or England and things like that? Like any cultural differences, how they approach this particular art?
I think yes and no. I mean, there's different materials and different techniques. I think overall it's kind of all become sort of homogenous and mixed together. I think at one point there was a big divide where if you went to England and went to an effects studio over there, they had very different materials and techniques. The end result was the same. Okay. But they had a different process to get there. Yeah. I think over time, especially with the internet and YouTube and everything that's out there, and people's willingness to share information has really kind of blended it all together. Okay. So I think the same techniques are used all over the place. They may call it something else. They may put a U in mold, and things are a little different. But overall, the process is pretty much the same.
But it was different before? It was fairly different?
Yeah, I mean, at one point, like England was, I would say England and Los Angeles was like at the forefront. So if you went to other countries, it either didn't exist or it was still just kind of at the beginning stages. And then from the 80s on, they really started to grow, or late 70s, let's say, all these other places started to expand. And I think for the most part are on the same level. I think there's more artists still in Los Angeles, but now it's global. It's everywhere. Yeah. Just not the same amount of work. I would say England and Los Angeles are probably the biggest right now. Right. Where Sydney and Gold Coast and some of those places are much smaller, and some other obscure places throughout the world are a lot smaller. Vancouver's still fairly big. Okay. Not as big as it was. I mean, it's all sort of, based on where the work is, and people will travel kind of thing. So, New Zealand, when Lord of the Rings and everything was happening down there, they hired tons of people from the United States to go down there. Yeah. And they trained a huge degree of the local crew down there. And then when The Hobbit came around, they were able to bring out less. So they created an infrastructure that was there. It's the same thing that happened. We're kind of like a virus.
It seemed to blow up like crazy for New Zealand after that. I mean, for those
it did,
things.
But then right now it's not. Right. It's
right.
kind of the work has gone to other places, and it's gone to Australia, or now it's going back to London, where a lot of the work that would have been shot in London went to New Zealand, and it's all about taxes and credits and incentives, and where's the best place for the production to film at that time. Right.
So. Were there any new techniques used on Aquaman as far as practical effects makeup is concerned?
I think not necessarily new, but I think we were able to advance some of the ideas and techniques that I'd kind of started working on Tron with my team of people there. We were able to develop that, I think, even further on Aquaman. And, Tron was kind of the proving ground of a lot of 3D printing for me, and a process to do it. And I learned a lot from that. So as an art director and studio owner, I've been able to kind of share the mistakes or things that I would have done differently on Tron on projects like this. So it simplified a lot of that. And I think, the technology is far beyond where we were at on Tron. So it's just more simple because of that. But I think, like the whole Red Commando suit, the whole Red Commando suit, that's 100% a 3D printed suit. And that's kind of what we did on Tron. But there was things like on Tron, we made the body, we actually took the body and left it kind of asymmetrical like a human body is and tried to build around that. thinking that it wouldn't fit right because everyone's anatomy is kind of, if you built something that's tailored to someone and they've got a slight turn to their body, you want to sculpt it to that. What we found on Tron is that wasn't necessary.
Okay.
So on this, we just made everyone's body that we're building on completely symmetrical.
Okay.
So we just picked a side and then mirrored it.
Okay.
And it fit and worked far better. So just little tech things like that we learned on this. But overall, the makeup process, I think the general approach to everything was kind of the same. You know,
Okay.
It was really just using a lot more 3D printing, at least for us, to build things. And, bringing in 3D scanning in the shop so we could actually take sculpture, scan it, throw it in the computer, mirror it to save time. There's some interesting techniques that we started to, I think, further expand upon.
Sometimes they only sculpt like half, right? Half the face or something.
Yeah. I mean, like, for example, many of the helmets, we would just sculpt to one side of it, kind of get the gesture, get the shape of what we liked, and then we'd go in, 3D scan it, mirror the whole thing in the computer, and then make everything precision in the computer, and then 3D print the helmet. But it still had a clay and a traditional sculptor's touch to it.
Right.
So you can kind of, working in clay, as a sculptor working in clay, you can kind of sense where the person's head is a little bit better, where in 3D, you're looking at kind of a weird void of space. It's hard. Mathematically, you can kind of judge how far away, but until you really touch it with a tool, you don't really know how far away that's sitting, at least for me. Sam and some of the other guys that work here, Sam's really used to it, so he can judge it far better than I can, so I have to rely on his opinions in some of those cases if I feel like if it's too thick or too thin.
Okay.
And sometimes we'll print a sample just to double check. But
yeah.
No, I mean, I think from this, I think we learned a lot of stuff like sculpting just half of the head.
Okay.
That's definitely a technique that we will continue to do or develop further on. And then also just building 100% in the computer for some of that stuff.
Right.
I think we'll definitely continue down that path.
Right.
So.
I'll get more into 3D printing in a second.
Yeah, no worries.
That's near the end, at least as far as the questions are concerned. So let's see here. Let's actually go into your history for a little bit. How'd you get started doing this? Were you a kid making fake blood?
Yes, or collecting fake blood that you could buy at Halloween and kind of keeping a little surplus of whatever I could afford, that year. But yeah, I would say I started getting into this, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11. Started getting an interest in horror movies and making fake wounds and starting to play around with stuff. By the time I was 14, I was really into it.
Okay.
I have friends that hit me up on Facebook and, people I went to junior high and high school with, and they'll send me and they're like, hey, do you remember in science class you built that whole anatomical head with all the muscles on it? I'm like, no, but it sounds right.
Yeah.
And you made it all burned. Sounds about right. Yeah. So, but I mean, I grew up pretty poor. I didn't have a lot of resources. So I had to kind of work with residual stuff that was left over from Halloween a lot. Okay. I didn't have the money to go out and buy plaster and alginate and for sure. Sculpting clay. So I really didn't get into sculpting until, I don't know, it was probably 17, 18, like really sculpting and trying to learn how to mold. And then shortly after that, I mean, I got into, I started working for Stan Winston and, some other shops around town. Took an internship, with a local shop to kind of learn a little bit more about the process. And a couple of years into it, I was teaching. I started teaching. I went through an assistantship program at Joe Blasco, which is actually, when I was in junior high, it was a school that I wanted to go to. I just couldn't afford the $10,000 or $12,000 to go there. So to kind of get that opportunity I had to go in and test for Joe Blasco and do a bald cap and do all this stuff to get hired. And then I went through his program as an assistant instructor. Okay. So I got a diploma that way. And then ended up teaching for Westmore and some other schools around town. And then eventually was with Stan's, and I was Stan's for almost 10 years. Bounced around to Steve Johnson's, went to ADI at one point. I mean, kind of worked across the town like everyone else out there. Yeah. Before starting my own shop in 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you were a kid, what were the movies? I mean, was it like the Thriller? Was it Rick Baker specials on TV? Like, what you saw, like Exorcist? Like, what was like some examples of stuff you were really inspired by?
Yeah, definitely a lot of Rick projects, but the one that really, I think, the two that really kind of sold me into trying to pursue this was The Exorcist.
Okay.
When I found one, it scared the living hell out of me when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And then the other one was John Carpenter's The Thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I think is still an amazing movie today. It just once I saw that and how extreme it was like, oh my God, how do you do this as a job?
Right.
And started doing research and kind of learning more about people like Rick Baker and Dick Smith and learning the sort of history to makeup. And then really started pursuing it, trying to figure out a way to become a makeup artist. But I remember like there was little specials, like the Thriller special was a big one that I watched. The other one was Steve Johnson did a special for the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards.
Okay.
And he did all these makeup demos on his wife at the time, or girlfriend at the time, fiance, Linnea Quigley. Mm-hmm. And I just remember watching that going, oh, this is awesome. Like making zombies and showing how to make fake blood.
Right.
I mean, it's just one of those things that I remember watching that kind of inspired me to get into it a little bit more. When I was 16, I was dating a girl and her mom was a photographer. And I said, hey, I've got an interest in doing makeup effects. She's like, well, what about doing beauty makeup? I'm like, I don't I don't really want to do that. But she's like, well, it's a good paying job. If you learn how to do it, I'll hire you. So around 16, I started working with her, and she had another makeup hairstylist that I kind of studied under, and did that for kind of the first 4 years, 3.5 years. So, I mean, in high school, I was already doing fashion shows, and I was doing events with her as a makeup artist. Okay. Never thought about doing beauty, but really my professional background actually starts in print and fashion. Okay. So before I ever did effects,
you all the models and stuff.
Yeah. Did models, did a lot of Los Angeles doesn't have a lot of runway, but they do have a little bit of it. A lot of photo shoot type stuff. Right. So in high school I was driving at the time I was living up near Big Bear. Okay. And I would drive down from there a few times a week to go to like Huntington Beach or downtown LA or something like that.
2 hours, right? 2 hour drive, right?
Easily. Yeah. So, but it paid really well. I think at the time I was getting paid, I don't know, $18-20 an hour.
You were 16, 17.
I was like 16, 17. Yeah. So where most of my friends were working at Pizza Hut or, something like that, getting at that time, probably $7 an hour or something. So, growing up as a poor kid, trying to save to get out of the town that I was in, I was more than willing to try and make those drives to try and earn the money and set myself up for a career.
In Mississippi, I mean, you're from New Orleans?
I'm originally from New Orleans,
yeah.
But I went from New Orleans to Texas and then ended up, I think around 4th grade, ended up in California.
So you've been here since 4th grade.
So I was a transplant. Okay, yeah. So I lost my long ahs and my accent pretty young. So.
That accent is not really a Southern accent, It's kind of like almost Boston.
The no.
To me, it's similar to Boston.
But if you go to like Louisiana, they have a long ah. To things. So.
It's weird.
Louisiana's got their own thing, and I think it's the Creole mix that's sort of in that French tone that's kind of things. It skews their accent a little bit. Yeah,
it's like a little bit south sometimes, but then it's not. It's definitely its own thing.
Yeah, I guess Bostonians sort of have that too, or Maine, where they have like ka, ba. So it's
not much of an R.
Not much of an R, where I think it's a harder R when you're in it. It holds more when you're in the South. Or at least
it's the hardest R in the South. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Were your parents how they were they supportive of you getting into blood and gore effects makeup at a young age, or did they think it was weird?
Well, I grew up with my grandmother mostly. Okay. My mom was kind of around. Dad wasn't around at all. So grandma, being that she grew up during Great Depression. She thought it was a little weird. She thought I was disturbed and probably considered sending me to therapy a few times. But,
Okay.
No, I mean, she was. Once she saw that there was actually a career that I could make out of it, and I was really pushing hard to do that, and I was diligent about trying to, make money, and I wasn't just screwing around.
Right.
I think she saw that, and then when I started doing some movies, and she wasn't around, by the time that I had my own company. She had already passed away at that time, but she kind of saw like at least some of the movies and some of the things I was working on, and they were pretty high profile.
Okay.
I think at that point she really was very accepting of it, and it's not like I was running back home asking for money either.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. They like that part.
Yeah. It's usually they enjoy that. So.
Yeah. Okay. You're known to be a bit OCD by your friends and family. I think you accept that.
I do. Yeah.
Is this a quality you think that helps you to get to where you are now? Are OCD artists more successful?
I would say yes and no. I think there are some people that the OCD side of them gets the better of them.
Okay.
And it makes them non-efficient, and they can't compromise. And I think the compromise part of it is, I'm not so OCD that I can't let go of things.
Okay.
So yes, I think it's got me to where I'm at because it's made me an overachiever in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Where I work really, really hard and I beat myself up a lot. So I think I'm my own worst critic.
Okay.
Always.
Yeah.
And I think most artists are. I think
Yeah.
every artist has that. And then I think the OCD side of it, of being like efficient and being organized and I'm just always trying to learn new things and sort of better myself, which is part of my weird OCD. I think that's helped me it's helped push me to improve. I know I'm OCD, but I would say I'm more anal.
Okay. Yeah.
Where I'm a perfectionist.
Right.
And an overachiever in that sense, so
Right.
I'm constantly no matter what I do. I mean, I play guitar, I do martial arts, I do fishing, but
right.
It seems like everything I do as a hobby I take it to the extreme level.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing martial arts, I take it as far as I can go. If I'm just playing guitar, I took 15 years of lessons and was in bands and probably could have went professional. I just realized it wasn't going to make any money for me.
Right.
That's why I gave up on that in high school as well. But, the same thing, fishing. Like fishing started as a hobby, and now I actually do that semi-professionally. I do pro tournaments and have sponsors. And it's just in my nature to kind of constantly push myself to see how far I can go within anything. So.
There's a lot of people throw around OCD quite a lot. I
think it's a good general term to kind of explain someone that has some kind of specific control over certain things.
I mean, I think before people were, what do you call it, like medical terms became very common in everyday speech. I'm assuming back in the day people would just say, "Oh, you're very particular," instead of OCD, which has this whole other thing to it.
It does. Like I can walk down the street and step on cracks. I mean, I don't have to close the door 20 times.
My dad is like that. My dad.
So that's true OCD. I mean, that's true OCD.
Yeah.
Where you have some obsession that you just can't get over, and your brain just doesn't allow you to get past it. I mean, I don't have that. I think I'm just more of a perfectionist and very anal in my approach to things. I'm very specific about how I do things. I'm very particular.
Right. My dad, my brother, they have to almost every time when they get out of the car, they have to kind of check. I don't know what they're doing. They check the inventory of the car, go around it, and then we're good, and then go into the store or whatever. It's. I didn't get that.
I used to have a little of that where I would. I definitely have it. It's in me. I know it's there, and I have to stop myself. But one of the things that I would always do is my garage door. So I'd close my garage door and I'd start to drive down the street going, did I close my garage door? And then
that sounds fairly normal.
I'd have to turn back around and look. But sometimes I would have to do it 2 times.
Yeah.
Where usually on the first one you go it's closed and you leave. Or
that's a home security thing too though, right?
It is. Yeah. It is, but it's I mean I guess it's like checking your stove or anything like that.
Yeah.
So
don't want a gas explosion.
So generally everyone thinks that I'm just OCD.
People talk about it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
People talk about it. It's all right.
I'm just very organized.
Yeah.
Very specific.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed using a label maker and organizing things, and like people joke on set that they'll come up and move a brush on my station to see if I notice, and 99% of the time I notice. So
yeah. And you said you do martial arts. You said that, and you're interested in Japanese culture, I know.
Yep. I always have been since I was a little kid.
I wanted to ask about that, and I'm going to tie this in with the OCD, or the being particular. Japanese culture as well is sort of known to have, you could call it OCD, but like an attention to details. Japanese people have told me that too. They kind of feel like foreigners don't pay attention to the details enough.
It's true.
So is that one of the things that kind of got you, like, did you have a connection on that level with Japanese culture, or was it just ninja movies, or what?
I think as a kid, it was like ninja and samurai movies.
Okay.
But then as I learned about the culture a little bit and their level of perfectionism, it really kind of hit a note within me. It was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. You can strive for, to be your best in all these things, and it's not considered weird.
Right.
And there's just a level of craftsmanship and precision and their worldly view of beauty within nature. And there's just so many elements that really kind of I connected with and just deeply was just naturally ingrained within me.
Right.
So it's not something that I learned. It's something that I saw as a correlation to something that I already felt. Okay.
Yeah, I grew up, the initial trigger for me was video games and anime, but, you kind of like, you graduate a little bit, you go to the language and the culture and all those kind of things. So,
well, you've gone even further. Your level of the language is far beyond mine. I just had not too much stuff in my life really, and didn't have a chance to focus on it. But for the last year, I've been really trying to focus on it, and I do like Duolingo every single day, and I'm trying to learn because it's like one of those things that I regret not doing years ago. Yeah. So now I'm trying to make up for lost time. I think learning the language is an important part of if you want to be connected, especially on the martial arts side of it. If you want to be connected, you really need to understand the language. To kind of get better insight.
Yeah, that helps a lot. I feel like that's sort of a difference, I think, with a lot of people. If you're just into, like with anime or something, there's like so many anime fans out there, they just don't know anything about Japanese culture, and how much should they know, really? It's just movies they're watching, but it can help you to know the deeper side of where things are coming from, and with martial arts and things like that as well. How Japanese people think about certain things as well. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's definitely, especially if you look at the older culture, it's very, very different. They have a very opinionated kind of approach to things. And I don't say that in a mean way. It's an ingrained element, I think, within the older culture, where the younger generations, I think, are becoming a little more westernized, and that's
a lot. Yeah, it's happening a lot.
Yeah. And I want to say it's almost to a fault of the culture, though, that it's damaging the culture.
It could be.
No studies on it yet, but it seems like it could. It's like they're having their 60s revolution now. Although it's Japan, it's a totally different style. They're not a bunch of hippies running around.
They never had a drug revolution. It's an island nation. You can't sneak that stuff in. So but
it seems like those things are starting to kind of happen there, which is changing their culture, and it's like our 60s. It's like I see that kind of starting there now.
Could be.
We're I think sex is less of a taboo in their culture. They're starting to get a little more violent crime. There's a little more free speech. There's different views on marriage, and everything is really rapidly changing there within the last let's say 15, 20 years. And it feels like our 60s transition of where you started having free speech, and there's sort of a cultural revolution that sort of happened at that point, which for good or I don't know, maybe it was worse. I don't know. I feel like maybe the 50s were a little more sheltered and a little better world to live in here.
In some ways.
I think we were more efficient as a culture in engineering and actually doing better things for the world during that time. Although
post-war.
I mean, I think people are a little more hardworking, a little more respectful, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of that has gone away, and people are a little more, jaded and just kind of crappy towards people on a regular basis. And
Yeah.
it'd be nice if some of that came back again. Half the time, I hate being around people outside.
It could have been. I mean, they were all soldiers coming back from war, so there's like on both sides, every side,
sure.
So there was a little bit of, for better or worse, that influence on people. But that's what people rebelled against the next generation, with our 60s and stuff. So
hopefully we get better as a world at some point.
Japan does change fast, because when I was living there from 06 to 09, I taught English there. No one even knew what Halloween was. It's just an example.
Right.
Now there's this huge, in Shibuya, Halloween party. They were flipping over cars. There was a bunch of arrests.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
It's not like trick-or-treating with kids and stuff. They've taken the influence, but they ran with it. It's just a big outdoor party.
But Colonel Sanders is still like their Santa Claus, which is cool.
They have their own Christmas. That's I used to get asked, "What date are you going on? Who are you going on a date with for Christmas?"
Right.
It's
because it's like their Valentine's Day, right?
Yes.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yes.
You're supposed to give a gift, and
Yeah.
it's like a gift to your loved one or potential loved one.
You go on a date.
It's weird.
And then New Year's Eve is the time you spend with your family back home, cozy next to a fire, you go to the temple. They call it Hatsumode. You do your temple thing,
Right.
And that's maybe that stems from praying for good luck or whatever. But
How long did you live there?
3 years and 3 months.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
it's a little while.
I mean, I learned Japanese mainly from just being there. Obviously, hearing it all the time, but also learning how to write and stuff from being in the faculty room. I was so what happened was my dad. This is a backstory on me. I swear we're going to wind this up soon.
Sorry.
My dad went to pharmacy school and then went to medical school. So he did a lot of great things in college and after college, and I just went to film school, and I'm that was it. So for me, I almost internally sort of viewed being in Japan as like my post-grad or whatever. It's like, okay, I did film, now I'm going to do Japanese. I'm really going to do it.
Right.
So I got these kanji cards, flashcards, and all the books you could imagine. And when you're an English teacher in Japan, most of the time, if you're not teaching a class, you're in the faculty room, and they just let you study. So you would have only 4 classes a day most of the time, sometimes 5. So that's 3 to 4 hours a day.
But you're there 8 hours?
Yeah, 8 hours or sometimes more. And, if I was a really great teacher, looking back, I should have done more overtime, but I always just left. Always.
Typical gaijin.
Yeah, they called it a gaijin smash back in the day.
Yeah.
Where you just
go and work and then leave.
Yeah.
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 Try and find your Japanese wife.
But I was,
many of them.
I was also 22, so there was no way I was staying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just studied my ass off in the faculty room. So that's kind of how that happened. So that was like being thrown into the fire. Horror was your favorite growing up? Not sci-fi.
What was my favorite horror?
Your favorite genre of film or movie or TV show?
I'd probably say, I don't know, probably horror movies, honestly.
Yeah?
Yeah. That was probably my first thing that I got into, which was, I'd go and try and watch all the obscure horror movies that I could find. At the time, there was some crappy VHS
Street
store.
Trash?
I don't think I ever watched that. No.
Okay.
But I remember one of the worst, which I actually pulled up recently. I saw it on it was on Amazon Prime or something. It's called Video Dead.
Okay.
And it's just a horrible 80s zombie thing where the TV releases zombies into the world. It's horrible. It's really, really bad.
Okay.
I remember at the time going, oh, this is awesome, because there was some scene where they'd killed a dog shoving a tennis ball down its mouth.
Okay.
I think the zombie did. And I remember as a graphic image, and I went back to watch it, going like, "Oh, this is gonna be really cool." And it's unwatchable.
Okay.
It was an unwatchable movie. But I mean, it's something. I was really into like the Alien movies. I was into like, you know, Terminator was awesome. All of the.
Are you Terminator 1 guy over Terminator 2? Because I feel like everybody in my generation, I mean, you're not that much older than me, but I feel like, you know, like people around my age, Terminator 2 is clearly number one. But some of the people that are a little bit older than me in the shop, they seem to be pretty in agreement that they like number one more.
I think number one is good. It's a different movie. It's kind of like comparing Alien and Aliens, in my opinion. They're both, I think, standalone good movies. I think action-wise, Terminator 2 is way better and has way cooler effects in it.
Right.
I think Stan Winston and ILM did phenomenal work on that.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that being more inspired as an effects artist by that movie than I was by the original.
Okay.
Because the original, Stan Winston did a great job with that as well. But you know, you look at it now, the budget's very different. The head doesn't hold up very well as he's, you know, doing surgery on his eye and his arm. And it looks pretty bad. But story wise, it's a good story. It's still a good movie. It's still great sci-fi action. Just Terminator 2 is just far more polished, except for the main kid, which I just want to kill. Edward Furlong.
Furlong, yes.
I can't stand that kid. I mean, even when I watched the movie, I was annoyed by that kid. So.
Okay.
But it's still a great movie.
Okay.
I was into like a lot of Carpenter stuff too.
Okay, right.
I was really into like The Fog, and I was into Big Trouble in Little China, huge martial arts and sci-fi horror type stuff. And The Thing, like I said, The Thing was that's still one of my favorite movies. Today. So,
one of the guys that's here has worked on that. Mm-hmm. He had the choice between Star Wars and that, and he chose The Thing.
Yeah, he made a better choice.
Yeah. Return of the Jedi is okay, but The Thing is, you know, definitely like a classic.
Yeah, Kurt Russell's awesome in it too.
So. Yeah. We're going to wrap it up. So, like last few questions here, what would you like? Is there anything you want to see happen in Aquaman 2, story-wise?
Story-wise. I don't know. I'm curious to see where they go with it. You know, I'm hoping they don't necessarily tie it right into like another Justice League kind of thing again.
They said that they're not interested in that.
I think that's good. I mean, I think Marvel did a good job with that as well, where they really developed individual stories before they started doing the Avengers and squishing it all together. I think they could do another full story. Maybe it has a little more history that's tied into it, which I think would be really cool.
Right.
See some of the past of, although it's been kind of summed up in this movie of what Atlantis was, but there could be some cool backstory that's there and further development. I'd love to see more of like the Fish Kingdom and just see what they do tie in. Like, what is the next villain that you kind of put into it?
I think it's gonna be Black Manta. I mean, I don't know for sure, but it seems like that's what they're setting up.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but I mean, I don't know. Is there another huge villain in the comic books that they could tie into?
I mean, he's got a bunch, but Black Manta's more or less his Joker. Yeah. You know, it's like his number one. It's just, I mean, how much can they do underwater? You know, if it's Black Manta? I mean, I know he can go underwater, but I don't know. I think that's something they're gonna have to tackle. I think that at the very least, Black Manta has got to kill Arthur's dad. It's got to be eye for an eye. He's coming for Tom Curry is his name?
Yeah.
Thomas Curry? Yeah. I think that's got to happen in the first 30 minutes.
That's a good revenge story.
Yeah.
It could be a good one.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he believes that Aquaman killed his dad, which he kind of did.
He let him die. Yeah. Straight up, could have saved him.
Yeah, but he was kind of a dick. So.
Yeah, I know.
He was killing other people. So.
Yeah, and that's how the comics go too, you know. He's
got to having a little of that vigilante. He's not a vigilante, but having a little of that quality to Aquaman.
Yeah,
keeps a little of that darkness that's in there.
Right,
and doesn't make it all light and sparkly.
No, I mean, if you've seen the movie, you know, and read the comics, he's not as benevolent as Superman. That's like
right.
The top of goodness, you know, but then Aquaman is, you know, somewhere below but not villain either, of course.
Right.
All right. Is there a dream project you want to work on? I think, didn't you say one time you definitely want to work on Batman at some point?
Yes. Yeah. Honestly, yeah. I mean, that would be a good one. I mean, I've kind of done. I mean, a Terminator project would be cool too, but just because I was able to do, an Aliens project and a Predator project. Too bad it was both those movies put together. And Alien versus Predator.
The first AVP.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun job to work on. It was crazy, but just not a great movie. I wasn't a huge fan of it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a big fan of the other ones afterwards, but
yeah.
Still got to work on some Aliens and work on a Predator, which was fun.
Yeah.
A Terminator thing, but Batman. I think Batman would be cool. I'd love to build a Batman suit.
Yeah.
Just because as a kid, I was always a huge fan of Batman. I still at home have, a box just filled with Detective Comics and Batman comics.
Yeah.
Really followed it. It was really one of the only comic books that I really did follow.
Okay.
Deeply.
Yeah.
As a kid, I had a bunch of other stuff, but that was the one that I always liked. And there's something about just the fact that he's just a man.
Yeah.
That I always kind of connected to. It's like, it's just a guy that's a vigilante that's going out there trying to do the best job that he can to protect his city and the people that he loves. And there's nothing, weird or ethereal, or he wasn't an alien. There wasn't anything else that changed him. He was just a badass.
Right.
And he had really cool toys and cars.
Right. Yeah. The gadgets. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember like the 89 Batman Tim Burton one, saw that. I loved that movie.
Yeah.
Loved the car.
Yeah.
Loved the whole vision of it.
Yeah.
It's the first time I had kind of seen that rubber suit look, which just looked super cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I remembered the Adam West,
Yes.
which is not cool.
That's people respect that more for what it is these days, but
it's great.
It's
campy.
fine. It's fine.
Campy, tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
And Adam West was great in it, but the Michael Keaton one was pretty awesome.
Michael Uslan, this guy that's a producer for all these films, he's the one that actually picked Burton to do the 89 one, I think. He said that he was a kid that grew up reading the comics before that show, and he said he was both mortified and excited when he saw it, because he said that even the comics at that time were a lot darker than what the show was. Right. Even those those 50s comics, early 60s comics. And then Adam West comes out, and it kind of it changed it a bit too much.
Well, it's the same thing with Green Hornet and everything else at that kind of around the same time.
Yeah.
It's network television didn't want to put something dark on.
Right.
Even if you looked at Dragnet or, some kind of cop show, that was still compared to now, it's like the Andy Griffith Show.
It's
It's really watered down, jokey, and that's what the studios thought the audiences wanted. They didn't want to show negativity, and I think we're kind of getting that again, where audiences do want something that's a little more lighthearted, and kind of the reason you go to the theater or you watch movies is it's in a way to escape. So kind of tying in all of the crap that's in your world on a daily basis in the movie doesn't make it really fun. And I think it's good that the industry is kind of shifting and taking a risk to be a little more creative and a little more fantasy oriented and take people to a new world. Where I feel like for the last 15 years there hasn't been a lot of that. It's been really grounded kind of stuff. Really gritty. And I think a lot of that came from, reality or paranormal activity, kind of, single camera type stuff like that. There was a big surgence of that. Found footage type stuff where they're trying to make it feel as real as possible. I think that kind of bled into a lot of other genres as well. So not that they're doing single camera to make found footage, but that kind of everything is real and as real as possible. That kind of tone spread out to a lot of movies.
If you had your say, how would you make your Batman suit?
Definitely a lot of 3D printing.
Okay, but like the gray suit, kind of what you saw in BVS, the Batfleck suit.
No, I really like the. I'm not a huge fan of the cowl for the Christopher Nolan one, the last one. But I think the suit itself had some really cool tech looking stuff to it. I think if you combine that with a little bit of like the tactical kind of desert version that they did of Batman in that's Batman Superman, right?
Yeah, the nightmare sequence.
Yeah, where he's got the the goggles on.
Yeah.
He's got some tactical equipment that's on him. I mean, if you kind of blended the two of those together, so it's kind of like a, what are the military suits, like DARPA suits?
Maybe something like that.
Got a little mix of that kind of thrown into it. So it's grounded, it feels tactical, it feels functional, but it feels super high tech.
Okay.
Something along those lines. And still low profile and sleek.
Supposedly that Nolan that in the Dark Knight, when that skyhook thing, even that was based on something real, like some CIA thing.
Oh, I'm sure.
Whenever he got pulled out of the building in China.
Oh, yeah, right.
Everything had some sort of grounding to it.
I'm sure they found as much possible tech that was really out there. Which I thought all that stuff was cool because it does feel so tangible. It feels super real that, it's tech that does exist.
Right.
Right here and there. And I like that they explained a lot of that too. Like, his little grappling hook, his spelunking tool. All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I would also like to incorporate some kind of cool samurai elements into it as well. I mean, I think there's a cool tech way of doing some of that. So it gets sort of that ninja look.
The martial arts aspect's huge in it. And the whole ninja thing, like, there's that anime that came out recently called Batman Ninja.
I haven't seen that, but I saw some clips and it looked really cool.
It's insane. It's kind of a comedy because when you watch it, it's just they know that they're making something ridiculous and they just go for it. But there is a lot of ninja stuff. And to me, anytime Batman throws a smoke bomb, I'm just so into that. Yeah. I love that. And fighting in darkness and things like that. Like I feel like, they should have a scene like the warehouse scene in Batman vs. Superman. That was a really awesome fight scene. Good, probably the best Batman fight scene. Yeah. They should have that, but I think that my hope for whatever Matt Reeves does is that he, there's the stealth aspect to the fighting is a big part of it.
I think they tried to do that in the Batman Begins a little bit with kind of the ninja environment.
Yeah.
I don't know if it really came across as super stealthy.
Yeah.
And I never bought Liam Neeson as Ninja, but
he's fine.
He's still cool though.
He's a big guy.
He's still cool.
Hard to hide.
Yeah. He's really hard to hide.
Yeah. Watch your ground or whatever. Or your footing. Watch your footing.
Mind your footing.
Mind your footing. Yes. So last question, what's the future of Fractured? You've grown quite a lot over the years. Other than a dream Batman project, how do you see Fractured growing?
That's a good question. I think I've always pushed to be involved in tech and as much tech that we can get our hands on. That's why we do so much 3D printing, and I've incorporated 3D scanning and 3D modeling, and I've really tried to create a pipeline with visual effects as well. So we're designing things that are a seamless hybrid between the two,
right? Where
we're actually building the models and we're building or scanning our sculptures or whatever it is to provide them with the correct information to work with. I'd like to continue growing that even further, and I would like to continue more in the medical industry as well.
Okay.
I think there's something really gratifying. All of our work with the Boston Children's Hospital has been great, and I'd like to do more of that, even if it's with other vendors or other entities like that.
Right.
And just continuing to develop and take risks and try new materials and new processes within house here. I think we're always trying to do that. I'm always willing to do a calculated risk and try some type of new process or technology. Definitely want to try more of that.
Right.
And just, see what the future takes. There's so much amazing technology. We're right on the cusp of some incredible changes, I think, within the 3D world.
Okay.
And just the manufacturing world and how that can change our industry, I think, for the better.
Right.
And just trying to stay on that cutting edge is really important to me.
Right.
So we'll see. I think a lot of people, if you don't start moving in that direction, you could easily kind of get washed over.
Yeah.
The speed and pace in this industry now compared to what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, it's drastically different.
Right. It's faster now.
It's way faster.
Yeah.
It's way faster. I mean, we get a third, quarter, sometimes even less, to build things. So I think accepting 3D technology, 3D printing, and other ways to design and build for this industry is really, really important. And it keeps us building, I think, a really sound, high-level product that you can do in a short period of time.
Right.
The cost isn't there, so there's a big price point that's still there, so it makes it a little inhibitive to really take it on fully, because the technology is so expensive at this point. But I feel like we're just on the turning point where there's a lot of, within, let's say, the next 10 years, there's going to be so many tech and new materials that are going to come out, and new machines that will come out, that it's just drastically going to change the price point and make it more accessible across the board. I think even to the public. I think the public is really going to start making that shift. There's a really great book called 3D. I have to look it up. It's on 3D printing, but it's on the sort of ramifications of what 3D printing is going to do globally, to 3D printing your house, from the ground up, with every single color, every component, electronics, every material that you can imagine. I mean, I think we're 20 to 30 years from that type of stuff, but 3D printing organs and organic materials. And we're just on the turning point of that stuff becoming possible, which printing with organic materials or similar organic materials is something that possibly we could use as well. That's something that could tie into makeup effects and medical as well. So I think the more we can kind of continue to grow that, the better we are. And I think it opens us up to a wider market as well, and not just completely reliant on the film industry, which is one thing that I want to try and achieve, is, not being 100% reliant on the film industry, and trying to do things that are in the medical industry, ways to give back, ways to feel like we're actually helping, the masses, and helping people that really deserve it. We'll see where that goes. I mean, there's so many different ways.
You think traditional sculpting might eventually be like 1% of?
No, I mean, I think that's still going to be there, but I think, and I've encouraged it to everyone here, I think learning ZBrush and learning 3D modeling is important, and I think it's going to become more and more valuable over the next few years. So the ones that have that in their repertoire and in their skill set are the ones that are going to be working more often, and they're going to be more diverse. And I don't think that's just within Fractured. I think that's going to start happening.
Industry-wide.
I know a lot of people that may have worked at Legacy or some of the other studios around town. They've also encouraged some of those things.
Oh yeah, I would assume so.
I mean, you have to. I mean, it's silly not to. And to just be so stubborn to not learn something new. It's you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot.
But it's definitely not going to be almost 100%. You got ZBrush artists and then 3D prints being grown.
I don't think so.
That's not going to be the most of it?
I don't think so. Not yet. I mean, I think, it's, the technology isn't there yet to where the resolution of what you can do in a sculpture and a handmade mold is the same as what you can do in a 3D printed mold. It's close. It's very, very close. It's just not, it's a 10% difference though. That's what I mean by close. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Like the high resolution printers that we have here, all of our maquettes, they're not even sculpted anymore. They're just 3D models that we print. And the detail on them is pretty damn good. They're a little washed out, but the old 3D prints where you look at things where it's just stair-stepped and the whole thing has little layers in it, that doesn't really, it exists, but that's with cheap, low-resolution printers. And why you saw so much of that is because that's what was affordable to people. Now you can get machines like our high-resolution printers, and you can put it into a company of our size at a price point that's not insane. Where 10 years ago, there's no way. You just couldn't afford to do it. unless you had a lot of money coming in with massive projects. You would sub it out. You would sub it to a service bureau. So now we can actually do it in-house and not have to do that. So
They were saying that kids were going to be able to, you buy the file for the sneakers that you want, and then you 3D print your own shoes.
yeah,
That's going to be one of the things in the future.
I mean, Amazon is already investing in 3D printing. They're already investing in a platform to actually have downloadable content. Everyone's starting to turn that way. Yeah. And I think it will. I mean, I think at some point you want to, I don't know, I'm looking at like a wall outlet over here. If you want to like print a wall outlet, but you want to give it some cool filigree so it matches your, 1900s craftsman home. Right. You could, you could just download the file and have your little home printer and print it and go plug it on the wall and be done, and never have to worry about shipping or anything. And you could pick the color and whatever you want. So we're right there, and I think personally, within the next 5 years we're going to see more of that. Oh yeah, a hell of a lot more of it, honestly. So.
All right, man. Thanks for being the first
guest
on Movie Dojo.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.